All right. So welcome, folks, and thanks for being here. And a special thank you to our guest speaker today, Dr. Harish Hande. I'll introduce Harish and then hand it over to him, and there will be time for a Q&A after he speaks as well, and I'll share a Slido link with you in the chat shortly. So Harish is an Indian social entrepreneur with over 25 years of grassroots experience in meeting the requirements of underserved communities. He's the co-founder of Selco India and is presently the CEO of Selco Foundation. Today, Selco's interventions have impacted more than 500,000 poor households across 6 different Indian states through work on innovation and ecosystem building. And for this, Harish was awarded the Ramon Magsaysay Award in 2011, which is kind of widely considered the Asian version of the Nobel Prize. Some of you might recall that Kamal worked at Selco many years ago, and she considers Harish a dear friend, as do we at Terra.do. When I first joined Terra as a fellow back in summer 2020, Harish was one of the first guest speakers, and I was certainly very inspired by his story. And so I look forward to hearing from him again today. As I say, we'll hold a Q&A after Harish speaks, but in the meantime, over to you, Harish. Thank you again.
Thanks, Liam. Thanks, Hannah, for this, and thanks, Kamal, for inviting me. I'm sorry. I think I did a judgmental call to come back home. Normally, the office has better internet, but hopefully it stays stable today. But anyway, so thanks for this. I'm sure when Kamal asked me to be part of this journey, what you all have been doing, which is incredible, that we need to be more what you call it as vocal and more champions that need to be pushing for this agenda of climate, as well as for us very critically, for how do you be the voice for the poor in many ways, because today, whether it's COVID-19 or climate related risks and climate change, it's the poor who are taking the brunt, and for no fault of theirs. And so if you look at in the last 2 years, in India alone, 200 million Indians went into poverty, and at least 100 million of them would be into generational poverty. And what means that at least for 10 more years, they will not get out of poverty. So that's where it's hitting. The cost of climate is so enormous on the poor that we lose generations of kids who are not going to be the future taxpayers, not able to actually be that change, that aspirations that they all have. So we started Selco as an experiment way back in 1994-95, and pushed the boundaries of solar per se at that point of time, saying that, people used to say solar is expensive. So we used to say that in 1994 solar was expensive for the rich and affordable for the poor. The primary reason was that rich had access to electricity, which was subsidized, and the poor had to rely on expensive forms of fuel, that was kerosene. So the question is, the poorer you got, the more percentage that you spent on energy. So it was a paradox of the energy distribution. And today, the richer you get in many ways in parts of India or elsewhere in the world, was that you don't realize that what the vagaries of climate is actually doing to numerous, whether it's the Tanzanian poor or the Sri Lankan poor or the Indonesian poor, or even in the Navajo in central United States. So the effect is uniform across what's happening, but the cost is never considered, because when people say there's a flooding and so much of cost has happened in London or in Delhi or or Jakarta, but nobody actually calculates the cost when the poor get hit, and whether it's Bangladesh or whether elsewhere. So because there's no cost. So we wanted to push those buttons early on, but though we did not have climate as a focus way back in '94, it was more about poverty, and somehow believed that sustainable energy could be a powerful link to make that happen. So we started with one house in 1994 to push the boundaries that poor can't afford, to destroy three myths: that poor can't afford technologies, poor can't maintain technologies, and the third myth was you can't run a social venture in a commercial manner. And those were the three myths in which we started. And today in Selco India, which is the for-profit which started, has around 650 employees, 60 offices, and and two of my colleagues who run the institution, basically from the rural areas, who grew up the value chain of the organization, starting as technicians and office assistants, and now they're the CEO and COO. And people who are from India would realize that how India is such a, in terms of casteism, in terms of language, I'm telling, not in terms of the caste, but language casteism, that money goes to PowerPoint, Excel, and Word. The non-English speakers have actually no chance to get money for innovation, or leave alone high quality what risk entrepreneurship. So two of my colleagues who grew up the ranks are the people who run it, who learned English via running Cell, but they have actually made it profitable during the COVID crisis. And so Celco has been profitable for the last 14 years. And especially in the last 2 years, it's been profitable, including, which proves that decentralized nature of business always makes sense. When during the COVID, centralized systems collapsed across the world, especially the migrants coming back, they proved that decentralized energy was the best form of democratizing services like health, education, livelihoods, leading to economic activities by the poor in the rural areas, leading to Celco being profitable. So the way I mean, it was very clever of both Mohan and Guru Prakash to say that they would not lay off a single person during COVID. And during the lockdown, they actually provided 3 months in advance salary with 1 extra month of monies for medical expenses if anything happened to them and their family. And then they said, yeah, we could easily recover that later on in terms of the break evens. And they also said, we will not lay off absolutely anybody, and created and what they did was also the previous, I mean, the way the profits actually work in that organized in Celco is that 20% of the profits is kept aside for the employees. And the way it is done is that we a certain amount is fixed, and the main amount is divided by that, and say 100 employees would get it. The lowest earning employees get the first hit of the profits. And so, and it goes up the chain. And that's why if you look at the turnover of employees in Celco, which has 600 plus employees, is less than 5 to 7 people leave on a yearly basis. And so the bottom 40% has never changed for the last 10 years. And the top 50 people have not left the organization for last 18 years. And so it's a very tight-knit organization that has believed, and that hires people not on the basis of resumes or LinkedIn and other type of interviews. Is basically everybody goes through an interview process in a manner that, are you in it for the passion, not for the romance? Because romance dies down, passion will remain. Are you frustrated enough to solve a problem? Because for us, frustration is a basic need for motivation. If you're not frustrated enough, then you're not motivated. Do you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to actually solve the problem? Do you get up for that? That's not making you sleepless. And those are the type of people in the organization of 600. And when people said idealistic, we push those buttons previous us. We don't take resume. We're really saying that please keep your degrees, because I went to the so-called the Indian Institute of Technology because 300 million Indians did not write the exam. If they had written the exam, I would not have gone into that. So we have an exclusive system of a running race where we are all at 50 meters and we win the race and say we won it. And that so much of the poor are at minus 50. So Celco, unfortunately, is known for solar energy. But for us, it's like, how do you break the mix, push of education, the push of what you call it, degrees and language, and make a truly inclusive organization that's a representation of the society. And that's the only way we believe sustainable businesses can be created. So now it has 600. We have people from, we have no idea what are the qualifications of the people and where they come from or what they come from. So we basically trained a lot of people for different skill sets over the years. And is it run professionally? Absolutely. Otherwise, it wouldn't be profitable for the last 14 years. And with one of the best logistic systems, I mean, they have done it. I mean, my colleagues have done it. Liam, I ran Selco till 2014 per se. And after that, I left to Mohan and Guru Prakash and myself and Thomas, then joined the foundation. And after me and Thomas left, it started to do better. And Selco performed much better after, and we used to joke that we should have left earlier. Then because the democratization of decisions became much better, and with Mohan and Guru Prakash, who were truly from the field, were taking much better decisions. That was faster, that was better, and they have actually taken. And when we left, it was approximately the turnover of the organization in terms of revenues in today's rates would be around $6 million or seven. It's now $25 million approximately. They have ramped it up to 4 times. And the way it's structured, it's owned by 3 not-for-profits. One of them in the US called the Lemelson Foundation, which is based in Portland, and 2 of them in Europe, in Zug, in Good Energies, which is a mother entity of CNA, and the other one is Dune Foundation, which is based out of the Netherlands. And so we have approximately more than 1 million households that we have covered. And the focus is that how we would create the after-sales service that we are able to provide service to every individual client within 24 hours. And we do it in a manner that they are financed. 80% of our clients are financed by third party, which is mostly the regional rural banks, not the MFIs, because we believe that the expensiveness of interest rates and expensiveness of the term makes the financial product more expensive. If the poor need to get out of poverty, somebody needs to finance them with assets. And asset-based financing has to happen. And that is what the rural commercial banks are the best. And that's when we piggybacked on this banking structure, very similar to what happened in the 1970s when India was starving, and the government nationalized the banks and forced these banks to create appropriate financing for the farmers and encourage the vocational schools to help technicians sell water pumps and fertilizers. And that led to the Green Revolution and led to more food production and supply. We are using the same methodology to do the energy revolution and for decentralized energy. So now, if I fast forward over a period of last 20 years, so our focus presently in Selco has been pushed towards health and livelihoods. And in livelihoods, what we do is, if you look at the bottom 40% of the any pyramid per se, it's broken up into 3 parts: poor, very poor, and abject poverty. And all of these 3 are very different in terms of technology innovation, delivery model innovation, and financial innovation. So Selco works on financial innovation for street vendors. I mean, typical example, we say the best financial lesson, which I told you in the last one also, what that was. I have learned from the street vendors, so that 300 rupees a month is expensive, but 10 rupees a day is fine. Basically, the cash flow of an individual street vendor is on a daily basis. Similarly, a lot of the poor who earn on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, our financial systems assumes that we all earn on a monthly paycheck. And what we learned here in Selco was, how did the rural banks were financing paddy farmers? They would do it 5 years, but collections on a yearly basis, because paddy was once a year. Peanut was twice a year, sugarcane twice a year, school teacher once a month, and a street vendor on a daily basis. So in this case, just a simple, how do we actually work is that we put up solar. They did not want solar lights. What they needed was lighting for 4 hours in the evening. So differentiation between a product and service. And so what we did was we helped an entrepreneur take solar panels and put on top of his roof, put 40 batteries, that he took 40 batteries, and we helped him get a loan by putting a bank guarantee. The entrepreneur would deliver solar charged batteries to these 40 street vendors at 6 o'clock, and at 10 o'clock would come back and take them and take 10 rupees. And so for him or her, the cost of charging the battery was 6 rupees, and there was a savings or a 4 rupees per day per battery. So he would make 160 rupees on a daily basis for 2 hours of work, and 50% of them would actually go to the bank loan. The street vendors, on the other hand, were spending 15 rupees on kerosene on a daily basis, and now they were paying 10 rupees to the guy who was delivering solar powered lights, was an effective saving of 5 rupees. So nowhere I have used the word environment, climate change. It's basically and saying, oh, you need subsidies. Absolutely not. What happens in today's world, especially in providing services for the poor, we are not creating students out of management schools, engineering schools, or anywhere else to design programs. We design projects, and projects are very unsustainable. Design programs, the design level thinking of how each one of us should be an anthropist, or in a direct manner be a solution provider. We are not an MBA finance, we are not mechanical engineers, we are not electrical engineers, we are not metallurgy engineers, but we are solution providers end of the day. And that's what I push the colleagues both in Foundation and in Selco India, is that how do we innovate work on efficiency of a sewing machine? How actually could we work on a silk weaving machine? What are the new innovations that should be done for a technology that has not been touched for 200 years? That is the blacksmithy. Nobody works on a blacksmithy because it's not sexy enough to be written resume. But those are the innovations for the 40% that needs to happen. Who works on technology for the less than 2-acre farmers? Because unless we do not look at technology for less than 2-acre farmers, agriculture, which is having the largest impact because of climate, you're going to create forced migration from the rural areas of any part of the world towards the cities and towards elsewhere in the world, because we are not creating innovations and creating unfortunate aspirations on the other side, and not creating aspirations by creating better technologies and innovations. And that's what we say, that solar is not about solar panels and batteries. Solar power is much more than that. It's a societal pivotal or a catalyst to push multiple families up the social ladder, making the world a much more sustainable in many ways. And now if you see today's war, which is so sad on a basis of energy and cloud, could have been broken up had we looked at sustainable and democratization of services to everybody else. The unequal distribution of wealth because of unequal distribution of resources, energy, etc., is what is always leading to these conflicts, whether you talk about the water war in Yemen to the energy war here in the Ukraine and elsewhere. So for us, unless we don't democratize, and solar energy is such a powerful tool that could lead to democratization. And one other example, which is kind of always easy to explain about how we do the ecosystem approach or design thinking in the colleagues of ours, is, for example, how do you reach out to very, very poor people who earn less than $0.50 or 25 cents on a daily basis? And what you ask them is, oh, we need subsidies. And no, people would say subsidies and Excel sheets and it's not viable, etc. What they will tell you is that I just need 4 hours of lighting so that my child does not need to go through what I have gone through. And so what we've done is basically you need 4 hours of lighting. We put the light and the battery at home, the battery being less than a weight of a lunchbox, and the solar panels on school. And so the kid comes to school, she charges the panel, the battery, and goes back home. The mother says, I don't care whether you study or not, you got to go to school because I need the light in the evening. So you have basically looked at two things: education, and you have looked at lighting in a sustain. And the solar panel now becomes an infrastructure for education, just like your buildings, like your school books, like your anything else. It's like it's that. And then just like in anybody of us, the A plus B plus C, A is the coal-fired plant, B is the transmission line, and C is your house. Here A is the school, B is the kid, and C is the house. A plus B could be an entrepreneur delivering lights and services. You can do a multiple permutation and combination of A plus B to deliver what is service. So what is service and how can it be a business model? How could be a financial model? Where should the subsidy be given? So I think this combination of business models today, what happens is we're so focused on how do I price a product and sell a product. And we if that was the case, then for example, because the biggest pushback that we do today is like, who builds the ecosystem? Like, if you and me did not pay, the biggest subsidy Google got is the internet. Internet was an ecosystem that was actually paid for by the US military and others together, leading to Google. Who creates an ecosystem for the poor to actually afford a sewing machine or a silk weaving machine or a lathe machine or even a paddy thresher? That's what Selco is trying to do, is infrastructure in terms of the poor, the assets. Like, for example, we say that how do I cheat from airports? Airports are highly subsidized, are never profitable. But if you and me fly, that increases the GDP for any country. Similarly, a rice mill or a cold storage for the poor is the same as you and me take the roads and the airports. And it's a service that actually leads to people getting out of poverty. But moment we look at products, and the way we are taught today is that how should it be economically viable today? If that was the case, then no hospitals, no airports will ever be viable the way we are actually taught. So we need to break that into what is assets for a common good and how do you create operational efficiency of delivering those services. And that's what Selco pushes those boundaries. And climate, for example, everybody says it's complicated. That's because we're not honing down on solutions like whether, for example, a simple thing like a dairy value chain. A dairy value chain is what is the issue of a dairy value chain? You go from hydroponics for growing the fodder for the cow to milking machine, solar powered milking machine, to a milk chiller to keep the milk in chilling for the farmer to sell at the right place, to sweet making shop, that the sweet making machine. Everything has energy intervention. Today, what we look at as solar panels and batteries, we should actually get away from that. And how can SDG 7, that is sustainable energy, should be inbuilt into livelihoods, into health, and become a part of the other SDGs rather than on its own. So for example, in the dairy value chain, in the poultry value chain, because of the increasing of temperatures, the poultry farmers, they are losing a lot of chicks. The mortality rate of the chicks are. How do you come up with a much cooler poultry design of the poultry farm sheds with a cooling mechanism leading to increased incomes? Similarly, in the rice value chain, right from thresher to drying to rice milling, you can actually have an energy intervention. Same thing in the resilient micro businesses, whether it's a small shop, a eatery, a barber shop, everything has an intervention of efficiency using solar as a catalyst, leading to better incomes. So what we use overall is that the mantra of there's a huge link, there's a wonderful linkage between solar power and development, where the added benefit is the climate. And which is what we are saying is today's mitigation efforts, today's adaptation efforts that we can do in Tanzania, Mali, Brazil, Indonesia will lead to future mitigations. And it's not about increasing the efficiency of the cement plants, but it's actually, can I come up with different way of building material? And that will come from the poor. The 4 billion poor people in the world will teach the rest 3 billion. So the whole dynamic should get away from the rich and the developing and the developed countries. It should be the rich and the poor, because it's by talking about development in the developing countries, the rich in India get away by polluting. The poor in the developed countries actually lose out because they belong to a rich country. I think that's that. And we are in Earth. I mean, suppose, and the two biggest things, I mean, if I'm sitting in Mars, the two biggest wars for a person sitting is climate and poverty. And it's not be like, okay, what's the Americans have to do, the Russians or the Chinese have to fight first. It's ridiculous. It's a common goal, and poverty is one of the biggest threats. And so Selco, in a very neat manner, wants to push those buttons and make people uncomfortable. And can we use 2030, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as kind of a benchmark to push those buttons. And so that's where we are. We are 600 of us having frustrated fun every alternate day, I think. So thank you so
Fantastic.
much.
Thanks, Harish. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the work that the foundation does separate to the for-profit venture, because you, as you say, you've been leading the foundation since 2014, I think you said. How does that work differ from the kind of the social entrepreneurship, the social impact that was going on in Selco India?
See, what happened was we had numerous issues when we were running Selco India, and we had shareholder issues, we had debtors issues from the IFC, we had other management issues, equity, etc., etc. We said, and a lot of failures on the ground of convincing the bankers, the end users. So we didn't want other youngsters in the country to go through that problem. And so we said, and a lot of innovations had not happened. For example, the banker training programs, or innovation of a sewing machine or a blacksmith, those problem statements were not even on the radar. So we started the foundation basically for other youngsters to not go through what we went through. And so, because we knew that Selco, if it had to succeed, was to democratize Selco, so not about expanding Selco, for example, across. And it was about how do I create, I mean, my colleagues are very good in South India, but for other places like Manipur or Tanzania, you needed to have people who understood the culture, who created the appropriate business models. And so the Selco Foundation said it would take the brunt of creating the ecosystem elsewhere. And it works on 3 or 4 things. One is on innovation, on risk in terms of, can you work with partners to come up with a high quality blacksmith blower or a hammer mill? I mean, purely if you see, a lot of the innovations ever happened have been very men-centric. And for example, a rice mill, which runs on a diesel engine. And once you start the diesel engine, not only you need a man, but you need a very strong man to actually start the diesel engine. And a pottery maker, pottery, it's like, and a blacksmithy. How many of us have seen a woman blacksmithy or a pottery maker, etc.? So when we solar powered the hammer mill with a switch, or a rice mill and a pottery maker, suddenly gender came into play. And you had women blacksmithies. Today we never design from a perspective that you lose out that 50% of the population does not have access to those livelihoods, those innovations, both in terms of financial models. How can women take loans according to the cash flow they get? What are the technologies that are there for marginalized? What type of business models would, like for example, COVID really pushed the button, lamp. I mean, completely, for like the most jobs that transgender and sex workers, they lost immensely during COVID. And so we brought them into the folder using sustainable energy as a business model for sex workers, for transgenders, who are marginalized, and people with physical disabilities. And how do you, like, for example, we modified a person was working in front of courts, and he would actually type on a computer to go somewhere else, ask his son or somebody to take a printout. We actually modified a whole scooter with a printer, Xerox machine, everything, and modified for him to run it because he was paralyzed from below. So, and suddenly it becomes an income generating act where his son would charge the battery at home, and then they would sit in front of the court, and his income actually tripled. Same way, we created trans kitchens, solar powered lights, the washing machine for the people, and as well as and these are millet cafes that were run by transgender people that completely got them out of poverty, but the COVID would have pushed them back into those, and also work with the Association of the Sex Workers. So those are innovations both in terms of business models, social models. So how do you make them acceptable, right? How do you push back society who thinks that they cannot do anything, or people with disabilities do not have creativity, or even the poor in terms of do not have creativity? How do I redesign a pottery making machine? Today we all think in labs, but we never make a pottery maker a partnership in our innovation. So we have picked up the poorest parts of the country, in Northeast, Odisha. And also we are doing one thing, Liam, the COVID actually led to, we created an extremely large portfolio in the health energy nexus, and especially in the COVID scenario for swab collections. We were asked to build a hospital of 100 beds, and from scratch, we were given a piece of land. And when 21 days, we built a complete 100-bed hospital with oxygen, ventilators, and handed it over using everything sustainable material. The walls were all made of stubble, solar powered, everything. And now when the post-COVID happens, we'll convert it to a maternal labor room. And what we have now taken up is that in 4 months, we are doing 30 systems a day of doing 1,720 health centers, mostly the labor rooms, extremely high-tech baby warmers, operation theaters, as well as maternity wards of 1,720, the largest program in the world, of 30 per day of solar power in 10 districts of the country, blanketing all the 10 districts, 100% all the health nodal points using solar. That will open up the government to relook at energy health access. So the foundation is basically, how do you create the equivalent analogy of an internet for the other services? Like you push GE to come up with a better, what you call it as a baby warmer, more high efficient. Today, when I design solar for a baby warmer, people would complain solar is expensive, but nobody says that baby warmer is inefficient. How do you push companies like Godrej and others to come up with a much better vaccine refrigerators that could be, or a solar powered foldable dental chair? So rather than the poor coming to the hospital, can I give services right at the doorstep of the poor? So sustainable energy helps in democratize services. Rather than focusing on solar panels, it has pushed innovation of democratization. And that's what the foundation. In the foundation, we are around 110 people and work in the 8 districts of India that way.
Brilliant. Thanks, Harish. I remember from one of your previous talks that you went into detail about that crossover between solar power and health, and how many amazing kind of innovations you were bringing in, especially related to COVID. So it was good to mention that. So before I open it up to questions from our participants and folks, please do use the Slido link, which I posted in the chat, and I'll post again to put your questions in there, and then we can also upvote them as we go. I wanted to go back to Harish and just ask, because you touched on some of the kind of the challenges and the boundaries that you're pushing against, both kind of socially and maybe obviously innovation and technologically. But you know, what are the kinds of challenges you've come across in the journey, and how have you worked your way around them, whether they're social or more political or economic? What are the biggest boundaries that you've encountered?
Liam, the biggest boundary is still our education system. The education system does not push you to take risk in terms of program design. And the more educated you get, the less useful you become for society, right? Because your thinking process basically becomes a pyramid. And like say, if I have to send a colleague of mine down to north part of Karnataka, which is one of the poorest and the driest, and if I have a tomato, for example, dryer not working, now somebody should not come and tell me, sir, I'm a mechanical engineer, I will not be able to, but sorry, there are finance, which is another expertise. Imagine, Liam, if there's a street vendor who sells tomatoes, and if tomorrow tomato prices are skyrocketing, she's not going to sit at home and say, I'm a tomato seller expert, so I'll wait till it comes down. Her 3 kids will starve. She will start selling potatoes tomorrow. How are the poor so dynamic in changing their thinking process, while we become so-called experts and we never try? And that's the problem. We are not cross-sectoral in our thinking, right? We are very siloed, right? And in India, we are excellent complainers, right? In a sense that, oh, this is not working. Oh, that is not working. I'm sorry. The government has to do that, right? What is your role as a citizen? What are you innovating on? right? I mean, so this is something that I told last time. Oh, in a sense, we had a police inspector who came for a talk in my office, and he said he just caught a youngster who broke the red light and spoke and said, "Did you not see the red light?" He said, I saw the red light, but I didn't see you." Right? The question is that is our problem, right? That's our problem. The question is, we don't take it on us to actually clear and create innovation. So the biggest challenge, why I'm saying that, is when kids join Selco, the biggest pushback I have is from parents. They said, "Oh, Selco, social enterprise, his cousin is earning so much on Infosys and Wipro and Microsoft and Google. It will be difficult to get him married, etc., etc." So one parent came and I closed the door and said, "Sir, how was the traffic?" And he gave so much on the traffic. I said, "That's the problem. You all want Gandhi to be born in neighbor's house, not in your house. You don't want your son to solve the problem, and you want somebody else to solve the problem." And that for me is the biggest challenge, ma'am. I mean, if our education system became much more innovative in terms of go and take a risk, rather than saying I mean, people who are from India on this would know, is that if a girl comes home and say, "I've got 95 out of 100, the first thing I ask, "Where did you lose your 5 marks?" It's not about appreciating that she got something. It's about, your cousin got 96. You're getting 95. Where did you lose that 5 marks? So I think that's for me is the biggest challenge. And second is that non-ability to think the poor as partners, but poor as beneficiaries. That we always think they're beneficiaries. They are innovators. They are entrepreneurs. Because all of us here did a PhD on sugarcane, we will all be called an expert. But a farmer doing 45 years of sugarcane will never be called an expert because he or she does not have a PhD. And he will also always, or she has to sit on the floor. I will be given a chair and I will have to tell him how sugarcane is grown. And because I have a PhD, frankly speaking, because I had nothing to do for 5 years. And somehow I got a degree too, right? The point is, we are so fascinated with man-made degrees rather than learning, and we confuse education and learning. The moment we start thinking like anthropologists and program design thinking, have the poor as partners, and things change. Things will be wonderful. Things start. You rather than being complainers, you start becoming risk takers. Become innovators. You become positive in your thinking. Further, everybody says, "Oh, you moved back from the US. What about corruption?" I think about in 25 years, we've been very straight. We will not do a single government tender. We will not do government orders, no matter what. We have a certain business. Now when we go to government offices for policies, there are so many people say, "Oh, Selco has come. Don't ever talk to them about business. They'll kill you and they will not take business from you. But let's take policy thoughts from them. They are not going to take business from you. They are straightforward." And that's the reputation that got built by a lot of my colleagues, saying that we are going to intervene in creating policies for the poor. So I think the challenges from the government are minimal in terms of, if you have to do your work. It's been excellent over the years. It's been the relationship with again, there's good and bad in every part of society, whether you talk about education, government. But what we do is we catch hold of champions in the government and say, whenever they are there, okay, you're there for 2 years. Can you change the policy for maternal health care? Can you bring in sustainability into it? Can you make it institutional? For us, is the foundation level. When you said the goal of the foundation is to kill itself. By 2030, it should not exist, because you take philanthropic money to solve problems. And so you need to solve it. So moment you start growing, you're scared. That means you're not solving the problem more efficiently. So the question for us is that, and the challenge is to bring that process. And on the funder side, for example, the philanthropic world is all about M&E, I mean, monitoring and evaluation. I said, it's so much of money is now spent in M&E and impact to measure impact. I mean, how many of us here buy a TV based on an Excel sheet that how much time you waste? The true impact of TV is negative, but you still go and buy a TV. The question is, why are we talking about impact? I don't know. A kid gets educated. What it does in 20 years, or she or he does in 20 years, I have no idea, boss. Create a process. Set the process free. But we all have to make use of PowerPoint and Excel, RAM. So, I mean, because those are the challenges when people come and say, how do you measure impact? I said, boss, and people get irritated. I mean, I said, yeah, I know. How many of you affected? 1 million people. Oh, it's okay. Into 6 people, 6 million. I said, why am I counting them as cattle? It happens. I mean, the organization is doing good. I mean, people are go and ask simple questions. Yes, it's impacted. But too much of measurements happen nowadays, I think.
Thanks, Harish. Interestingly, there's a question in the Slido, which maybe you already answered, but I'll pick this one out first because it's relevant to what you just said. The question was, is there merit in Selco measuring the net carbon saved while deploying its solutions, and does it already do so? I guess you've kind of spoken to that in a way. It doesn't appeal to you, perhaps.
See, the question is, moment we left being a hunter-gatherer, we became carbon positive. Give me a break. I mean, if you really want to be zero, go back to the hunter-gatherer and say, I'm going to eat as much as I kill, and do it. Moment you start building anything, you're CO2 positive. Let's be very honest. And the second is that we are not calculating how many human beings are required in this earth to actually make it carbon neutral. And so we are increasing the population. So measuring in that, I mean, when people say that cook stores, oh, you're efficient cook stores, I'm going to measure it. And the way the carbon is like, really, I mean, I can make any numbers up. And the scary part is like cook stores, for example, right? And it's a simple example. In one example, we put up solar lights at home, and I had a great impact because the child is studying inside. So when there, I said, okay, I want to. So went there and said, what's the best benefit have you got? No, previously we used to cook outside because there was no light. So now we cook inside. And now what we did, by cooking inside, the pollution, and the kid is also studying, we actually made a negative impact on the house by cooking. So it's not about powering solar and capturing. Is the whole design sustainable? And my question is, we can all calculate the numbers. And now my question is, can we get one number that is 1.5 degrees, and what we are actually all going through in terms of temperature rises? You have create those mitigation and adaptation. Start seeing the numbers of development, poverty reduction. Your carbon numbers will come down automatically, rather than getting these nitty-gritties of 0.2, 0.4, 0.8. That's not going to move the needle. Let's start moving the needle in terms of large-scale process that leads poor out of poverty in a manner that is sustainable and equitable and inclusive, that leads to future mitigation to happen. And today we are unfortunately too much on efficiencies, because these efficiencies mean, like, for example, I put solar panel on top of my roof. Does it mean that I can have 20 air conditioners? Is that sustainable? Just because I have solar power? My question is, it's about sustainable consumption. The poor are going to go up in consumption. The rich have to come down. We have no choice if we have to meet the 1.5 degrees and to create that inclusivity in the world. So the numbers is kind of a big game. I don't know why we are playing that.
Thanks, Harish. I think you've spoken to a lot of the challenges in the way we approach problem solving, especially in the context of climate change. So all of that's very helpful. Thank you. One of the questions here was, let me just find it again. You talked a bit about the relationship with government as well. One question was, do you think we might see local governments incentivizing economically the communities' energy projects, solar installations, community level? I think I've heard you speak before about that democratization of energy, of taking people away from the nationalized national grids and things like that.
See, Chris, actually, I'll go to Chris first, and then I'll come to what Swami and Divesh have said. Chris, the issue of microgrids. Uh, the question is, we should not go from a supply side. We need to go from a demand side in terms of designing of systems. And microgrids is not about. Unfortunately, the push is on the technology that microgrids will scale up. 99% of the microgrids in India do not work. 99% of the microgrids done in Nigeria and Sierra Leone do not work. The issue is, it's like it's like the cable television versus dish antenna, for example, right? Now, cable television always has to be one up on dish antenna, otherwise it will get killed. And today, it gives you high-speed internet. The moment dish antenna comes up with high-speed internet, your cable television will actually go out of the window. And today, when we are doing the payment of the microgrids, the services that you're providing, that you keep paying for the service, by 5-year good financing, the financing is the key. If I get 5-year financing, many of these Tata and Husk Powers will actually kill themselves, say microgrids. They are dead assets. And the only places that it works, it's like Chris is saying that I'm not micro. It's like when asking your question, when will you use a Word? Do you like Word, Excel, or PowerPoint? Then you'll say, depending on what I want to do. If I do a presentation, I'll do a PowerPoint. If I do a document, I'll write a Word. Microgrid and individual systems are like that. We are actually pushing, like wherever there is a central, what you call it is a farmers cooperative that's running 10 to 25 rice mills. It puts up a microgrid where 60% of the money goes into the load, the income generating load. The 40% goes into the people's houses. So if the microgrid is not working, they will make sure it is working because it's incentivized to earn their income. So there has to be a different type of glue. And today they are not actually, Chris, they're looking at what type of glue and designing microgrids. And unfortunately, 99% of this will fail because you're not looking at the social dynamics and the financial dynamics for individual client base when they're designing. And that's why if you look at here, the Chatham rules is that Rockefeller's 1,000 microgrids. They went with a bang, 62 happened. Out of that, 50 don't work because we did not go with the business model of looking at what is the load, how is the payment mechanism to be done. Swami also pay as you go. Pay as you go is a tool. It's saying that it's not a model, it's a tool. Computer is not a model, it's a tool. Pay as you go is lowering the transaction cost of collections. Unfortunately, many of the companies in Africa, they're finance companies. They've confused themselves between a finance company and a technology company. That's why their debt to equity ratio is so pathetic that it evolved. And there are 2 or 3 companies on the verge of a major disaster there, where the bubble is going to be burst. And unfortunate part is people who've been in solar for many years will take the brunt that solar does not work. It was not about solar. It's actually pay as you go would have been a fantastic tool for banks. Because it's like saying that Liam took a car from me, and I tell him, Liam, use the car, pay for me whenever you use it. What Liam does is he puts the car in his garage. 2 days a month he uses it, goes on a vacation. My asset is in his house, and who's paying for that, right? And unlike a mortgage in the US, or anywhere, if you're not paying, your credit history goes for a toss. Here, there is no other incentives. In the Indian banking system, the banks provide a loan provided you give another guarantee. Pay as you go is a tool to lessen the transaction cost of collecting the money, leading to lower interest rates, rather than saying that pay as you go as a model is going to succeed. And that's why the systems in Africa are 4 times, because they want to recover the money within the first year, which is ridiculous. Because you're squeezing the poor, and because you want to make money on the pay as you go and want to recover as much in the first year, and saying, and it's a classic IFC statement, which makes that, oh, there's a $29 billion market in Africa because people were spending $29 billion on kerosene. Boss, they are poor because they are spending $29 billion. If they were paying to the kerosene, now they'll pay to you. So the poor will remain poor. You just transfer the money from here to there. I think that's where we need to break and create better models of inclusivity. So yes, in pay as you go in India, what happens is that why India, it has not come in the payment model is that people want to see the person whom they want to give money because of the legacy of the old banking structure, that we have 40,000 physical banks in the rural areas, which is actually good. And that is what Africa should do, because I'm going to give a debt to somebody, also help him or her do the business plan, though that he or she can repay the debt back. And we have directly jumped into consumptive. I mean, what I mean by consumptive, it's like in the poor, there are two types of income: expendable income and non-expendable income. Non-expendable income actually has to go for asset creation. Moment you use non-expendable income for consumption, you actually make the poor poorer. And that is what is happening, that you have taken away that 1 rupee or 10 rupees or 10 shillings to pay towards a shampoo or a motorbike, which should have gone into creating an asset. And so that's where I think it's pay as you go is still a long term. Microgrids is something, it's more of a program design that we need to look at rather than just looking at microgrids.
Thanks a lot for that, Harish. Thank you. There's a few more questions in our Slido, and I don't know if we'll get to them all. I think many of them we've kind of touched on already. But there's a good one here, which was, if you had to reboot or start over, if you went back your 25 or 30 years, and you had all the information available to you today, all the knowledge that you've learned, what is something you might do differently if you were going back to the start?
No, I would not do anything differently. I would not, because the lot of the potholes that I had to cross, I'm glad I crossed at that age, because at later, and I would not, in a sense, those are as important as your successes, and 99% of the time we have failed, and I think I do want to be that failure, because that has only led to better processes. So I think if people have a chance, we three, I mean, if people who are not from India, so it's like we don't celebrate failures. Everything we do is a success here, right? Everything we write is a highly success. The whole civil society is successful, and then we have actually made sure that 7 billion Indians have been benefited from our work, though we only have 1 billion people, right? So we are counting methodologies and everything goes. So my point is that there's a website that we did a conference on failures 3 years ago, saying that how should we celebrate failures, and we invited 55 speakers to speak about their own failures. And we didn't want anybody to say, oh, I failed because the government failed, or my failure is that I worked too hard. No, we didn't want that type of failures. We wanted and so we had of microfinance people from India would know Vijay Mahajan, who said, I screwed up $100 million, and this is how I screwed up. We had a senior government bureaucrat who how she went through failures, saying that if she did not know the agenda of everybody coming to the meeting, all her meeting. We had a film actress who came and said, what happens when a movie fails, and how does she able to cope up with? It's called impactfailure.org. It's a website we separately created for that failure conference. And on for carbon offset on cook stoves is also a podcast there. We had good panels on impact investors and failures of measuring impact, and those were, they were one of our best, where we wanted the youngsters to come out and say failure is a good thing. And so it's something that yes, I mean, if you say that, do we have to change? No, I the only thing I would start off is somewhere, maybe, 25 years ago, start to some of the schools to make sure that by now, at least there have been 100,000 kids who would have come out with a better sustainability in their mind, and then we would have better program design. So should have had 20, 30 schools in the portfolio working with them. And that point of time, they would have been 5, 6 years old, the kids. By now, they would be 30 years old, would be rightfully so. So I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Harish. I think, education, we always come back to education. Obviously, here at Terra, we're talking about education, but everyone also likes to think about other ways of of improving our educational journeys. And I like what you said about separating learning from institutionalized education as well. I think that's good. So in the last couple of minutes, I just thought we'd kind of close out with any advice you might want to give us and our fellows on, taking away the kind of heavy hitting messages you've talked about innovation and turning things on their head. What are your favorite pieces of advice to encourage people to take away when they're solving these problems?
Not any advice, but I just want people to say that wherever you join, if you can even become an entrepreneur in that organization, because today when we blame corporates, philanthropists, or grants, we want youngsters to go and challenge and create, and somewhere we get sucked up into the hierarchy of decision making and salaries. I think some of us, and especially when you're into Terra, do is to challenge those processes, and lot of difference can actually happen. And the decisions, because numerous times, I mean, actually I went to Sierra Leone, Liam, and what really was that we had the FCDO, the British, had done a $50 million microgrid for 93 microgrids, and 40 million actually went to non-Sierra Leone's companies. And 10 million was actually managed by UNOPS, which is also non-Sierra Leone's. And so 50 million in a country of not using locals as a program design thinking installation. And I went to this local area. It's like you have no transportation, you have extremely pathetic transportation, and you have gifted a Tesla, right? And say, gosh, use a Tesla now. And after 2 years, it's yours, and your maintenance is your headache was. And in 2022, if you're doing such programs, that the whole charity model, one way or the other, I think somewhere each one of you, I would say, is that break some boundary, and it's high time we started breaking those boundaries and see the era that fortunately for me, when Kamal and myself together, I mean, in terms of working on this for many years ago, that time it was not about the solar conferences had what do you call it, as the so-called the California hippies and it was more about sustainability, not about hippism, but I would say okay, how is it long term? How do you create long-term programs? And today it's like tie suit when I do an exit strategy by tomorrow. When would we have an exit strategy from an environmental work in this earth? When does the earth ask you? I mean, the only exit strategy fortunately it has is that human beings die after 100 years or below that. So the question is, we need to push long-term thinking. Long-term, let's not get sucked into quarterly returns, project-based thinking, immediate impact investment, what happens in a year. The earth is 70 million, so many millions of years old, and we are thinking so much short-term. We need to bring long-term.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Harish, for a really insightful talk about so many different topics and about your experience as well. I really appreciate you taking the time for us, and especially I know it's late in India as well. So thank you again.
Thank you, Lon. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody.